All right, everyone, well, welcome back. And we are very luckily joined once again by one of the biggest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu prospects in Australia, Josh Saunders. So firstly, everyone, our co-host Josh can't be here today. He had a few things he had to take care of, but as always, he's here with us in spirit. So, Josh, first man, thanks for joining us. How are things going with you today?
That's all right. I didn't like the other guy anyway.
It's difficult when you guys share the same name, eh? There can only be one, Josh.
I've never met a Josh I haven't liked. But no, it's good, man. I don't really remember where I was when I spoke to you guys last, but I pretty much I do the same thing basically every day, every week, and that drives a lot of progress. And obviously, that's kind of what people see on the outside. But yeah, man, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, man. Can't complain. Just grinding away. Same old for us as well. So, look, man, last time we spoke, it was you were kind of just getting ready, preparing for ADCC. So, I want to kind of take you back, and if you can you just walk us through the whole, ADCC experience? Your first match, you get matched up with Felipe Pena, one of the greatest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners on earth. And I was just wondering if you could walk us through the ADCC experience. Did it match up with your expectations? What surprised you? Can you just kind of talk us through it?
Yeah, man. So Luke, my coach, and we decided that we'll be early just to basically acclimatize to America. I'd never been on a longer flight than Thailand, which I believe is 6 or 9 hours or something in that vicinity. Yeah. And obviously traveling to the States is almost a 24-hour journey. So having a bit of jet lag and stuff is not conducive to good cardiovascular health. Ever been jet lagged, people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So we went over. Luke is good friends with John and Gordon. He's trained there many, many times. So he has a good connection there where we were fortunate enough to be invited to go train there at the gym in Roca in Texas. So we spent 2 weeks there. Awesome training. It was fantastic to be a part of that room and really get a perception of what it's like to be over there and training full time and all those sorts of things. Although it was inherently limited with the stuff that we were doing as it pertains to ADCC and winning matches and all those sorts of things. We weren't going over anything groundbreaking. It was wrestling heavy in the beginning of most of the sessions, and then it will be some basic technique stuff of, all the dominant positions in ADCC like turtle and all those sorts of things, and making sure that you can score, can submit, can pin people. So that was fantastic. Met all those guys like Merigali, Giancarlo, Gordon, all those sort of guys. Been in Big Dan. Big Dan was one of the guys we spent the most time with, which was really cool. And leading up into ADCC, we then flew to Vegas and got ready. Jeremy Skinner joined us 3 or 4 days out from the match. He actually had to try to not extend his trip too much at the start because he was going to have visa problems on the other end. He was planning to and train in Texas afterwards at B Team. So he decided to come in a little bit later, which I don't think affected him too much from what he said, but who knows? You're never going to know those sorts of things. So yeah, we get to a couple days out before the event, and we do like the team meetings and stuff like that. We do like a bunch of rules meetings and all those bits and pieces, getting to walk around the stadium beforehand. And the first ADCC Open was on the Thursday or the Friday before the Saturday. So it's cool. I got to see a bunch of top level guys compete, like Andrew Tackett was competing, Jacob Couch was competing. Got to see a bunch of those guys compete. So that was pretty cool. It was a nice little bit of foreplay into the event the next day up. We had the bracket reveal on the Friday night, of which I, again, like you said, drew Felipe Pena, which was not a bad matchup for me, to be completely honest. Out of all the ones that I could have gotten in that top 3-ish of where we thought I was going to be matched against with the seeding system, that was probably the most favorable, seeing as that Felipe had a leg lock deficiency, whereas Gordon and like Nicky Wright is just impossible to get a hold of, whether you believe the allocations or not. We have guys in our training room that are just super slippery naturally. So pretty excited with drawing Felipe. We drew up a bit of a game plan the night before. Obviously, you only get about 12 hours until you actually face the A benefit of mine is he's really well known, so I know his game. I know what he looks for. I know what he's good at. I know what he's bad at. And then woke up the next morning, drove to the stadium, had a bit of a look around, got ready, started to warm up, went out there. I look back at it. It's hard to judge yourself on the past because I only had the technical proficiency of which I had back then. It's hard to displace all of those things with knowing what you know now and then looking back retrospectively. I look back on that match still fondly, but I look back at the technique and I'm going, that's fucking disgusting. Like essentially a blue belt, of which the amount of time I'd been training making ADCC, I probably would be in any other gym, depending on how you see it, depending on how much you listen to Reddit and say that my fucking brown belt's fake or whatever those dickheads say. But yeah, it was a good experience meeting all those guys, all the competitors. We obviously mixed and mingled with a bunch of those guys when we're doing like the team dinners and stuff like that. And I think one of the biggest things that I took away, which was really cool, was that I didn't feel out of place there. Everybody was really nice. Everybody got along really well, bar a couple of exceptions, which I won't name. I won't throw anyone under the bus, but some cranky because they were cutting weight, or some people are just dickheads. Like, you just never know. A group of like 150 people, you're bound to not gel with some of them. But yeah, man, the biggest thing I took away was that like they're all just normal dudes. They eat the same food that I do. They take the same shits that I do. Like they just decided to dedicate a little bit more time to the sport. And it was a really cool feeling knowing that, you know, just the only thing separating me from them is probably time in. And that's something that I take to training every single day. That's something I compete with every single day now. It's just time in the game, enjoying the game as much as possible, seeing it as a game. Like gamifying the sport is something that I recommend people do. Not in sense of like having it not be serious. It's not that it's serious, but it is genuine. And if you gamify it genuinely, you'll probably have a more enjoyable experience. You're not going to be sitting there thinking, oh, I got submitted today, I'm the worst, or oh, I lost my tournament last week, I'm the worst. You're just going to see it as part of the game. There's going to be ups and downs, lefts and rights, all through it. You just got to ride those when they come and enjoy them for what they are. So I think that produces long-term progress a lot better than just hanging your hat on wins and hanging your hat on losses, and whether you do or don't get submitted in training or anything like that. I think if you can find a way to gamify it and enjoy it, you'll be much better off. And it's probably a catalyst from what I learned from ADCC, which is really cool. But yeah, that's pretty much the sum up.
And I think that's a really good point that you just raised, is that, you know, I feel like a lot of people, you know, I found especially at the lower level, they treat competing like, to take a quote from Luke Rockhold, like they are the last samurai on the battlefield and they have to conceive, believe, achieve. And look, 100% sometimes that mindset works for a lot of people, but I think a lot of times people forget that, look, if you lose, yeah, of course it sucks, but you're going to wake up the next day. Life continues. Life goes on. You can have another crack. And the other thing I wanted to add is that, you know, you did touch on it, which I think the fact that you were at ADCC, given how long you've been, you know, professionally in jiu-jitsu is, you know, pretty astonishing. And, you know, I don't have nearly the wealth of experience you do, but as someone that was watching it and has, you know, done jiu-jitsu and still does it regularly, I was watching it and I never thought that you were out of place there in the sense of this guy can't compete. He shouldn't be on the mats with these people. It never looked like that, at least to me watching it. So leading me through to the next question then, you kind of talked about it that after ADCC, you said one of the biggest things was being able to gamify the sport a little bit. But behind closed doors a little bit, did you have any dip in motivation after ADCC immediately after?
I don't preface my actions based on whether I feel motivated or not. So it's probably unfair to me to answer whether I had like a dip in motivation. I don't really pay attention to that as a metric of progress, to be completely honest. I didn't feel as lackluster as I anticipated that I would if I got knocked out in the first round. Yeah. And it was kind of, I don't know, it was twofold because I wasn't expected to win, so I could just go out there and have fun. But I also don't gel with that mindset at all. Like if I'm going to be the fucking best, I refuse to ever not put my best foot forwards. Again, it's hard for me to look back and watch that match and say that it was, but I think at the time I did a good job of that. which is interesting. But yeah, I don't think I ever had like a fall off or anything like that. I was definitely not disinterested within the sport. I was actually keen at the end of the holiday to get back to training and work on some things and basically dot some I's and cross some T's and get straight back into competing, which I did. I competed again, I think as early as late October, and have been competing minimum once every 6 weeks ever since.
And definitely, I think that consistency, obviously, it's just going to benefit you really in the long run. So switching tact a little bit, Josh, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about sort of one of the biggest pieces of news in the jiu-jitsu world recently, which is the $46 million Jack Greener lawsuit. Now, obviously, Jack's not going to get $46 million. For everyone who knows that the people who run jiu-jitsu schools, the guy's going to be lucky to get $46, if that. But I just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on that situation, you know, how you sort of obviously we're not there, but how you view that lawsuit from the outside looking in, and could it affect the sport in any way, whether that's, you know, gyms having to have more stringent waivers, you know, at their gym or things like that. Do you think that this lawsuit can affect the sport? And, you know, what is your opinion on the final decision with that?
I haven't followed it too closely, to be completely honest. I'm obviously aware of what happened. I don't know the outcome or anything. I think it's a bit rubbish that they played the instructor off as somebody who was negligent or malicious. I really think you could say that from what I saw on the footage. There's freak accidents that happen in training all the time. It's just the sport. It'd be like saying from my previous sport, rugby league, that, you know, studs are dangerous because they get caught in the ground and then you blow your knee apart. They're also necessary for the sport because when the grass is wet, you just be slipping and sliding everywhere. Like if you try to run wet grass without studs or without grip, it's not going to do very well. To say that somebody was using a technique in pure malicious intent is applicable for some things. Like if you're snapping on knee bars and trying to destroy people's arms in training, all right, you're a bit of a dickhead.
Yeah.
At least from what I saw with all the times I've been in that position, he didn't try and spike his head in the mat. He didn't try and fold him over his own neck. Like, he was doing a legitimized technique that has been done hundreds of thousands of times all over the world. Yeah, it's controversial for the obvious reason is that Rener Gracie was putting forward his testimonial, and he's meant to be some hierarchical guy of jiu-jitsu world or whatever the fuck he's accused of being. I think it's, you know, a lot of people took the shits with him because he got paid like $3,000 an hour or something to give expert witness testimony. Look, if they came to me and said do the same thing, sure, but I'm going to give an unbiased review and say exactly how it is. I'm not going to drag it out. I'm not going to say that this guy was malicious, because he wasn't. Now, that's my opinion, and that's great because the arseholes, everyone has one. But yeah, I don't think it was done maliciously whatsoever. I don't think the majority of people in jiu-jitsu are that way orientated. I think that's why the sport appeals to so many more people than, say, like striking or like boxing and Muay Thai or anything like that, because the majority of people, I'm sure you would understand this, guys, being an MMA show, that a lot of the gruesome stories come out of striking gyms. They don't really come out of two places. So I think it's a bit obtuse to say that it would even come from a grappling gym anyway. Now, there are no exceptions, obviously. But even Orlando Sanchez against Sean Strickland a couple of years ago, when he that little elbow wedge technique, like, I don't know, was he trying to break his elbow? Was he trying to do a technique? It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, and I think especially in combat sports, there is sort of that line between, you can mitigate risks for your training partners 100%. Like, you know, if you have someone against the wall, you're not going to, you know, high crotch single leg and dump them onto their skull unless they deserve it. But and, you know, but at the end of the day, it is a combat sport, and, you know, things happen. Right. That's just the reality of it. You know, maybe you woke up a bit sore that day, step wrong, you zigged when you should have zagged, and your knee broke. And the other point I think you raise as well is that, and to quote Colby Covington, look, most people in jiu-jitsu are nerds. They are. It's the truth. And, you know, the worst training stories that I have always come from MMA or striking classes every time. The worst training experiences I have. So switching tact a little bit, one thing that we're starting to see more of, and especially B Team is really doing this at the moment, is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes marketing themselves a lot more. It seems to be now that, and this is something that you're doing as well with your YouTube channel, which we'll definitely link below. In fact, you had a very funny video title I quite like, which is "I don't like beating up white belts." I think we can all agree we love beating up white belts, but it seems that they've started to realize that now you really do have to put some effort in to market yourself. It's not good enough to just rock up to the competitions and win. Do you think that we could sort of, see an era in the next 5 to 10 years where we have jiu-jitsu athletes that are recognizable, maybe not, mainstream to the level of like a Conor McGregor? I think that's a bit of an unfair comparison, but recognizable within the combat sports world. You have MMA fans or boxing fans or kickboxing fans who go, I may not follow jiu-jitsu, but I know who that guy is. Do you think we could maybe see that occur in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we're already having it with Gordon Ryan, Craig Jones, all these other guys. Like, even to, obviously it's a bit biased because it was an ADCC crowd. Lachlan Giles had the biggest pop of appreciation at the event. Everybody in the arena knew who he was because of the legendary story of winning bronze in the absolute division, going through murderer's row of all the heavyweights, and submitting people that hadn't been submitted all weekend. He had the biggest cheer of appreciation. And it's funny because I think you alluded to it beforehand that the guy would get $46 instead of $46 million. It's kind of like a necessary requirement now, because I get this question all the time. People always on TikTok Live or YouTube comments or whatever it is, they're like, how the fuck do you train so much if you don't have a job? Like, what do you do for money? Like, how do you earn money? It's like this mythical prospect. And I've come from running a business for like the last 6 years now. And like, it doesn't make sense to my head, because I've transitioned the mentality is that a job is not the only way to earn money. Like, there's so many girls selling pictures of their buttholes on the internet. Like, they don't have a job either, but you're not going to ask them what they do full time.
Yeah. It's obvious. Yeah.
I think the way that I answer that question most notably is that if you get really good at something by way of enjoying it and by gamifying it, you're going to, in a flip-flop kind of way, unison-wise, you're going to enjoy it a lot, and then you're going to get good at it. And the more you get good, the more you enjoy it. The more you enjoy it, the more you get good. And it's this really nice, like seesawing effect all the way up a ladder. And when you do that for long enough, you get so good that people are like, hey, how are you doing this? How are you having so much fun over there? How are you winning all these competitions? How are you doing all these sort of things? And this is cross-applicable for all of subjects of earth, like you guys with the podcast, somebody who's doing fucking finger painting down the road, or basket weaving, or whatever it may be. If you're enjoying it enough to get good at it, and then by proxy getting good and then enjoying it more, people are going to want to know how you did it. And if they want to know how you do it, you've just got to set up an avenue for them to pay you for your time, because they don't want to figure it out themselves. That's all it is. And I think, to answer your question about the social media stuff and people getting recognized, that's really all that is. If you have more exposure onto something that you really enjoy, then by proxy, you're going to have people that are going, hey, I'm a little bit interested in this. Maybe it's because of Craig Jones's comedy, or maybe it's because of Gordon Ryan's trash talk, or maybe because it's me bashing white belts on the internet, bragging about it like goose. I get a lot of people send me messages like, bro, your videos are so funny. They're not even watching it for the sport, which is a really cool part. I think the more I think it's a really good culture in jiu-jitsu, to be completely honest, because they're recognizing that if the pie of jiu-jitsu gets bigger, everybody else gets a slice. And it's not necessarily like a competitive, at least in my experience, it's not really a competitive nitty-gritty sort of what you would imagine in like venture capital or elite business banking or something like that, where they're like, oh, we got to squish the little guy. It's not like that. It's kind of like if the sport grows, we're on this really good rocket ship, and everybody gets to go to the moon if the rocket ship has enough fuel and gets big enough and carries more passengers and all those sorts of things. So I think from my experience, it's really cool. And yeah, absolutely. Like, Craig Jones gets recognized at UFC all the time. Obviously, him being Volkanovski's training partner makes a massive difference. People ask me all the time, do I train with any UFC fighters? And Tyson Pedro is at our gym when he does jiu-jitsu when he's in Sydney. So I think the more that those relationships start to grow and foster, obviously Volkanovski is a perfect example of using that against wrestling-based Russian people that worked very, very well.
Yeah.
And for that, like something so simple as like a Yoko Sumigashi hook that I know and use every single day that other people may not know from MMA camps, or it's colloquially known that MMA Jiu-Jitsu is dog shit. But all they do is try and not get taken down, or try and stand up when they do get taken down, and they don't do anything else in between.
It's the fundamentals, basically.
Exactly right. So when they do come up against a specialist of a jiu-jitsu guy, they get in a lot of trouble very quickly. So maybe more MMA fighters will be seeking out these types of people. I know Aljamain Sterling trains with Jason Rao. There's a lot of good connections. Obviously, George St. Pierre trained with John Danaher and Faraz Sahabi. And Faraz Sahabi's got a lot of other coaches, a lot of other students and people. So, yeah, I think that as that relationship grows with MMA, specifically with UFC, that rocket ship's going up as well. We will start to see more people getting recognized. Man, I get fucking recognized at like Guzman Gomez and all these other places, like when I go to cafes and stuff. Thankfully, like, they're enjoyable experiences, and I don't have like too many of them where it's weird. Some people just look at me and like, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, I look like an orc from Lord of the Rings. I get it, whatever. But some people are like, hey, bro, like I watch your videos. They're really helpful, all this sort of stuff. I appreciate it. There's actually a funny story. One guy come up to me in Coogee Beach on Australia Day, and the joke within my friend group is like, oh, I'm a big fucking deal, like all this sort of shit. I always play.
Yeah.
And one of my mates had walked further ahead, and this guy, I forget his name, he came up to me. He's like, bro, I watch all your videos. Like, I just want to say I appreciate it, da-da-da. I was like, thanks, man. Like, this is like really cool for me because I have no idea who you are, but you're gaining something from what I produce, and I think that's really cool. So I caught up to the mate who'd walked ahead, and he goes, oh, was that one of your fans? I was like, was.
Oh my god, you gotta love the Australian talk culture. It's awesome. It's probably honestly, it's probably my favorite thing about being Australian, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
everything else can get stuffed, but the talk culture, it's great. But look,
self-deprecating humor is easily.
It's awesome. It's amazing. But look, I just want to circle back. So you obviously got a bit of training in, as you said, before the ADCC in America. We've talked to quite a few athletes from Australia who go over and get a bit of training in America. And for them, they say the difference isn't so much that they're technically reinventing the wheel. Like, they're not so much doing everything completely differently. It's a few tools and the intensity of the training room in terms of the general level of everyone in the training room is a little bit higher. Did you have a similar experience, or was it a little bit different for you?
Like I said beforehand, I had kind of like an augmented experience. So like I was only doing ADCC style rounds in preparation because John runs a tight ship. Like, he's not doing this fucking gay reverse classroom stuff and all these stupid things that are popularized. This is a topic for another day. It runs a tight ship, and it wasn't necessarily that the technique was so much higher. In line with what you're saying, the level of competition was actually obviously very good. I think the biggest distinction that a lot of people don't notably talk about is that a gross majority of the guys in those rooms, whether it be like AOJ, B Team, Artos, New Wave, they're professional athletes. Like, they do the sport full time. They live, breathe, shit, eat the sport. And that's going to produce a certain type of grappler. Now, in Australia, it isn't as popular as it is in the US. It's also not as viable to make a living off doing the sport just yet, because to shit on my own sport and shit on all the people in it, inherently jiu-jitsu people are fucking lazy.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's
impossible to get them to wrestle. They won't do it.
The only reason they do the sport is because it's one of the only sports they can do where they sit on their ass and fucking do nothing and still be successful. It's fucking crazy. But yeah, so they're inherently lazy. So they are looking at the way to earn money through the sport in lazy ways. They're like, oh, well, everybody before me has taught privates or opened a gym, so I'll just do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But most people don't see that as a viable entity, especially if they can't put in the requisite hours to get good at the sport beforehand. Whereas in America, it's much more viable because there's a higher population density, there's an increased interest in sport, They can run instructionals. They can do lots of other bits and pieces that doesn't actually physically take up a lot of their time. So that's where they have the advantage. They have the advantage of the majority of people in those training rooms being full-time athletes, or at least on their way, or at least training 10 sessions a week. And you're going to have a raised, elevated view of the room as a result of that. Now, the training sessions still have to be good. They still have to be efficient. You still have to recover. You have to have the mindset. So there are going to be some standouts versus some non-standouts that are still there every single day. But that's the main difference between Australia and the US, at least from my perception. I actually said to my coach, Luke, that I am going to be the first gold medalist that has never lived in America to train at ADCC. That's one of the things that I've decided that I'm going to go for. And I think it's cool because you have all these guys in MMA. You've got Michael Bisping, Leon Edwards, Alexander Volkanovski. You've got all these guys that don't go to America to train because it's not necessary. Don't get me wrong. It would be a huge advantage to be training under John and training with Gordon and all those guys. It's not necessary. And
not anymore, no.
You don't have to have that to be a world champion. There's plenty of world champions from Brazil. There's plenty of world champions who have won titles from Japan or from Finland or anything like that, all these obscure, smaller countries. It is possible. It is doable. And I think putting Australian Jiu-Jitsu on the map as something I would like to do with my career in terms of where I leave that and motivate other people coming up to show them that it's possible and how to do it. I think there couldn't be a better way in taking that leadership foot forwards and going, hey, you can do it from Penrith if you want to. If you have the right mind, you have the right coach, you have the right team, you are constantly iterating your process, constantly being self-evaluative. You're taking care of the recovery, you're taking care of the tactics, you're taking care of the decision-making, the confidence, making sure that all your ducks are in a row outside of the sport in terms of business and finances and all these sorts of things. You can fucking do it. It's just like I said, people are inherently lazy or they're arrogant to think that, oh, well, I don't have to do that because I could just teach privates or anything like that. And that's their own personal journey. They can do whatever the fuck they want to do, to be completely. I'm just going to make a bit of a stand and take an onus upon myself and kind of put the team on the back and say, well, hey, you can do it from Australia. You absolutely can. I have the tools to be able to do it. I know that I can. My coach Luke has full faith in me and my abilities to be able to pull that off. And I'm going to give it a red hot fucking crack and see where it ends me up. So
yeah, no, definitely. And I think you said it as well. We're seeing more and more people become champions in so many combat sports without having to go to America. And look, for me personally, I really want to see a BKFC champ from Punch Bowl Sydney. I just think that'd be awesome. I just think that'd be the best thing ever. But look, Josh, man, last question for me today. I don't want to keep you too long, man. And we really appreciate you giving us some time. But kind of touch on it, which is you want to become the first gold medalist out of Australia at ADCC. What are the goals do you have specifically, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or out of jiu-jitsu, that you are really looking to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years?
It's a good question, and it's kind of a controversial answer because I really don't have goals, like almost at all. I have directional biases, and that might just be a finicky fucking gay thing to like as like an adjunct to say around it. But I just put myself in the best foot forward to recognize what direction I would like to be going in. I'm incessant on reading and listening to and cultivating ideas of philosophy. It's something that's encapsulated my brain for at least the last 12 years in terms of learning these sorts of things. And I think as an athlete, it's something that's very fortuitous in learning how to perceive reality, let alone just the reality within your sport. You can cross-apply that to everything. And Miyamoto Musashi is famous for saying that once you know the way broadly, you know it in all things. So I think it's remiss of people to say that I couldn't apply the same processes from business to rugby league to personal relationships to jiu-jitsu to everything. In a sense that I don't really set a specific target because I recognize that the game is to experience the game. It's not to win. It's not to end in a certain place. It's not to get to the end of your life with 51% good deeds and 49% bad deeds and label it a success. The reason that it is successful is that you're doing it. So wherever that takes me, obviously I want to drive fucking Lambos. I want to live in mansions. I want to live a good life and do those sorts of things. And that's more of a, as it pertains to food, that's a taste. That's a preference sort of thing. if those things don't happen and I end up becoming a fucking Buddhist monk and meditating in a cave for 30 years, so be it. But I think even what people can learn from this autistic ramble, as it were, is that have a directional bias of where you would like to go. Like, I didn't know that I was going to be a brown belt in 23 months. I didn't know I was going to make ADCC within 2 years. Like, I didn't even know what ADCC was when I started grappling. I didn't even know what fucking jiu-jitsu was before. I had no idea what the sport was. And like, just under 3 years later, I'm like one of the best to ever do it from Australia, which is crazy to even think of. Had I set that as a goal at the beginning, like I may have dampened myself in some aspects. I may have measured myself against other people and thought, well, I'm not here at this point where I should be at this point. I should be at this point, da, 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 da. I think I take a lot of these lessons from people who run super successful businesses. They don't start out saying, well, we're going to have an annual revenue target of $45 million. If we don't hit that in the first year, we're a fucking failure. Like, they don't have that. They focus on key concepts and some key structures, and they go, well, we really want to provide a super valuable service to everybody who is within our business so that it grows organically and does these sorts of things. I listened to an interview by the guy who invented MailChimp the other day. And MailChimp was a side project that this guy had. He had a website design building company. And over the years, they kind of like fed it a little bit. That wasn't their main focus, and it started to rise in popularity. And it actually only came about as a add-on service for the websites that people were buying off him, because they didn't want to handle all the emails and stuff. So you go, well, I'll got a software for that. He didn't even think about selling it. But then people started talking about it. They're like, hey, you have to put this to market. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar evaluated company as something that was like a side project, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, jiu-jitsu for me was a fucking hobby at the start. Like, I wanted to do something competitive with my mates. So I think like the roundabout way to answer that is like, I don't have specific targets aside from wanting to be the fucking gold medalist from Australia. I don't have specific targets that I look towards. I focus on the granular stuff that I do every single day. I make sure I enjoy everything that I do, because the more you enjoy it, the more you want to do it. The more you want to do it, the better you'll get. The better you'll get, the more you enjoy it. It's kind of like this nice thing that I explained. And I think wherever that takes me is wherever that takes me. I think it's a free sort of serendipitous surprise way to look at things. It's not at all lackadaisical, but it's exciting, and it's exciting the whole way through. And if people can really attach to that sort of thing and have that be the excitement, like, you guys don't know when you're going to hit 100,000 listeners. You have no idea. Setting a really rigid target for saying it must happen by the 21st of August 2024. You'll be measuring yourself against it, then you won't enjoy it, because you're only doing it to get the reward from doing those things. You'll only be producing episodes in order to gain views. That doesn't make any sense, because it'll be gross. The listener will listen to those and be like, oh, they're just pumping out episodes so they can get views. And
it'll be a mission rather than a passion.
Exactly right. You nailed it. And I think if people can find a way to do the opposite of that, they'll become wildly successful in whatever they want to do, and they won't be attached to these things of, I have to get here at this point, I have to get here at this point. And yeah, that's basically why goals are fucking stupid.
There you go. Heard it from the man himself, Biggest Cheese. So look, Josh, thank you so much for joining us again today, man. We really appreciate you giving us some time. We're wishing you all the best, man, in training and obviously competing constantly as you are. And again, we're going to link your YouTube channel below, guys. Please go check him out. He's producing great content all the time, and we'd love to talk to you again in the future, man.
Thanks, Alex. I'm more than happy to come on whenever you guys want me to. This is always an enjoyable experience, and we'll tell Josh that he sucks next time.
Definitely. Have a good one, man. Thank you.
Alex, appreciate it.